through the generous support of Syngenta Seeds, NK brand. The results you need, the freedom to choose. And by Farmers.com. Ag news, market prices, ag careers, and farm real estate. You'll find it all at Farmers.com. A 3-year study of buying habits reveals some interesting pieces of the consumer meat purchasing puzzle. Organizations representing lamb, pork, veal, and chicken have collaborated in an effort to better understand who is buying meat products in Canada and why. And, more importantly, who is not buying and why not. The study, called Consumer Data for Farmers in the Agrifood Industry, has been analyzed by Martin Gooch, the director of the Value Chain Management Center, and joins us today from his office at the George Morris Center. Martin, we've seen considerable data before with regard to consumer buying preferences of food in general. How is this particular study different?
This particular study is very different in the fact of how closely it relates to individual consumers. Most other studies we've seen have been in trends, they've been in sales. What this study does, it actually connects who is actually buying the product.
Now, the marketing itself, or the data itself, shows 18% reported that they purchased veal. 81% say they purchased chicken in the past year, 13% lamb, 77% pork. Did you measure or have you a sense as to how overall these percentages are trending upwards or downwards?
The key one that's trending upwards in volume is chicken. Lamb is trending upwards steadily. Veal is steady, perhaps actually falling slightly, and pork is pretty much remaining steady. So chicken is the one that's expanding at the fastest rate.
Okay. There are a couple of things in here I'd like you to comment on. First of all, in most cases, I think with the exception of pork possibly, you suggest in your review that the volume of purchasing of the other meats is disproportionately purchased by higher income households. Now, we've always known that protein is a more expensive part of the diet in general, but from your perspective, what should producer groups learn from this particular piece of information?
Well, the key thing is, even though actual volume is, say, disproportionate to income, at the end of the day, it's not about price. It might seem that way when you look at the overall figures, though it's about how is the consumer actually using the product. So what are they using it for? Why are they using it? And if it was simply price, the pork is one of the cheapest meats. That would actually have a higher correlation, you'd have thought, to the lower income than the higher income. So I think it's not just the fact that you're selling more to the higher income, it's also the types of cuts that the higher income bracket are buying. And they're buying it partly because they're buying through food service as well as through retail, and they're buying bone in rather than they're buying boneless rather than bone in. So they're therefore buying more of that meat, but that doesn't mean that people on a lower income aren't going to buy those same products.
Now, which of the meats, you measured which ones were most likely purchased on a deal? Which ones were more likely purchased on a deal, and what does that mean? What does that reveal?
Pork is most likely to be purchased on a deal. Behind that is chicken, and then lamb and especially veal are less likely to be purchased on deal. What it suggests to me is we incentivise consumers to buy on the fact that it's discounted. We don't encourage them to buy according to what the factors that drive their purchase decisions, which are factors like taste, convenience, flexibility, recipes, overall experience. Will the whole family eat it? They're factors that are more important to consumers than price. And though that's the way we've kind of trained ourselves and many consumers to think that price is a bigger factor than it really is. Certainly it's a factor, it's an important factor, though it's not the factor. And I think it's one of the big differences when you start looking at the figures in detail between chicken and pork, for instance. Chicken is not popular, it's not growing because of the way it's produced. Chicken is popular because the product that is offered to consumers and marketed to consumers appeals to them more. That's really the bottom line.
So you don't believe necessarily that certain groups have done better jobs of marketing the product necessarily, which reflects, I mean, because there's quite significant, 81% people say they have eaten chicken in the last year and only 13% lamb.
Oh, yeah, it's certain marketing is a big factor. Though it's marketing, it's not selling. When you put a product on discount to the level that we've seen through the research, you're not marketing. In my opinion, you're selling.
Speaking of lamb, an interesting scenario, I'd be curious just your comment. Your report shows 45% of lamb producers, purchasers of lamb purchase New Zealand product, 22% purchase the Canadian product, and Canadian lamb sells for a higher price than New Zealand, and arguably the New Zealand product has a higher quality perception. That's a deck heavily stacked against the industry. What is your sense on what the industry will take from this data?
I hope the industry will take that just because there's a lot of emphasis on increasing the supply of Canadian lamb, and I think it shows that you could increase the supply of Canadian lamb without damaging price. People are prepared to pay more, but at the same time they buy more New Zealand than Canadian lamb for two key factors. The first one is lack of supply of Canadian versus New Zealand lamb, and the second one is that they're not able to get Canadian lamb through the key outlets that they buy the majority of their lamb, which is grocery stores. The reason that a lot of Canadian lamb isn't in grocery stores compared to the volume of New Zealand lamb is that retailers simply can't get it in the volumes and consistency they require to make a consistent offering.
Your results show relatively positive picture for both chicken and pork, mass appeal, broad demographic, including a younger demographic, which certainly bodes well for the future. Your comment on the others, veal in particular, seems to have, from your data, an older and much narrower demographic. What's the challenge for them?
The key challenge is that across the four meats, veal has a challenge in terms of being perceived as value for money. It's not perceived as having the same experience as some of the other meats, which I think is a factor that's, again, it's down to selling, it's not marketing. We identify significant opportunities for all the meats. And what we've done as an agricultural industry, it's not criticising anyone, it's not at all. What we've done in the agricultural industry is sell what we produce. We haven't produced what the market wants, and we haven't produced according to what consumers are looking for at times, often in fact.
Your data shows here you call it a high correlation between volume and price with pork, suggesting that pork is sold as a commodity, and that's part of what you've just been referring to.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been lucky enough to have spent some time walking around retailers with people who are intimately involved with the overseas pork industry. What we produce in North America is a hog that's far larger than many other countries. We then modify it into a series of products that don't necessarily meet consumer perceptions. One level of the chain thinks differently to another level of the chain, so there's a disconnect there. And how do we operate? We operate on a transactional basis where it's volume and price rather than understanding what consumers perceive to be value. And we don't research what consumers perceive to be value. I've spoken to a lot of people in industry during this project, and the message has been the same. We do not, after seeing this information, we do not react according to what consumers perceive to be value. And so I'd hope from this project, the key thing that I hope industry takes away is that it's about value, it's about what consumers perceive value to be, and if you look around at the most successful products in the world, they're the ones that have made a direct correlation to consumers. And we're generally behind the eight ball in the meat industry.
Okay, Martin, we'll leave it there. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Kevin. It's always a pleasure.
Viewers who are interested to dig a little bit deeper on this subject will find the condensed versions of these studies available at vcmtools.ca.